Hello. Hello, Cataflake. Would you like to join the stage? Everyone is able to join the stage if they want to. You just need to request it. Just gonna give it a minute. We will begin the stage in a couple of minutes. Hello, Pixelated Hunter. Hello. Gonna wait a couple more minutes. I will be recording this, so if you want to have the recording, I don't know why would you want to, but it is available afterwards. Alright, so I'm going to assume this is the amount of people we're going to get. Alright. Hello, my name is Johnny. Today we'll be going over the basics of the fundamentals of international relations, the core ideologies of international relations. Pixel Learner, do you know anything about the ideologies? When you think of international relations, what do you think of?
Can you repeat that?
When you think of international relations, what do you think of? I want to know everyone's individual those thoughts.
Negotiations, high stakes negotiations.
Negotiations, okay. For me, For me, when I think of international relations, I think of intertwining. So I see as there are individual problems of each nation, and I see the inter as it's being intertwined, and the national being that is of different nations, of which a nation, if the official definition, is a organized group of people. So I believe that is if there's a core issue that is intertwined. So for example, if you have issue with not getting oil, I believe that would be something that would be a cause of having international relations. you would need a way for example, a country like Saudi Arabia has lots of oil, could bring it to a country that has very little oil or lacking. For example, the United States, which has some oil but it needs more. Anyway,
Nice example.
so yeah, overall, that actually brings up my second point: power dynamics. Part of international relations is that there's no matter what nations are interacting. For example, if it's Russia, the United States, Bangladesh, or the Vatican, there's always a different power dynamic. How each nation interacts with another nation. It's part of how each nation impacts the other nation. Kind of like why, for example, the U.S. would support Israel, but they would not support, for example, in another small country as much. I'll admit in the end I am going to be biased towards the United States, unfortunately, I'll admit. Um, Another point I would like to bring up is that overall, a part of the power dynamic is that it's not only the way it impacts their own nation, it is international after all. It how each decision impacts the other. So right now, I keep thinking of the small nation big paradox, um, where, as previously, one nation will have more power over the other nation, the United States to a small nation, um, and no matter what actions the big nation takes, it will impact the nations. For example, the first thing I think of is United Basics, the U.S. Prohibition Era in the 1920s and 30s. This was where it was really hard to get alcohol in the United States. And this overall, I believe, has a large impact on not only the United States, the domestic issue, but also international. For example, Canada, Mexico, and many of the Caribbean nations had a large impact from it. So one would say the domestic impact from it would be that overall the crime rate increased. Um, that people would do illegal things so they would get their alcohol. Compare that to the impact of it would have on other nations. For example, Canada. It actually increased their GDP compared to the. Yes, in the end, there was an increase in all nations. However, the amount of increase actually changed. The amount of the U.S. increase was actually less than it was by Canada. You can look at it yourself.
Yeah, man. What really affected in the prohibition era for me was like, you know, that basically everyone was turning to criminals, and I think Al Capone. I think Al Capone was around that time. He became pretty rich doing all this probation stuff. Also, with Cuba, I've been listening to a podcast called Blowback, and so due to the restriction on trade imposed by the US on Cuba, Cubans are basically fucked. It really affects their GDP.
Yeah, I agree with that. It did both increase and decrease for the other nations. As during the time, I'm bringing up a quote. A lot of people thought, well, that's a real big issue. I'm bringing a quote. In the game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a character named Jolie Bindo states, "Look, everyone always figures out the time they live in is the most epic, the most important age and knowledge is. But tyrants and heroes rise and fall, and historians sort out the pieces." So in the end, now we are going the shoes of historians. We can see how the impact of it was not really positive in the end. In the end, the United States did end up repealing this measure. So when we can see from this in the end that it actually had a lot more impact on other nations. This also brings me up to another a quote I've read, which is from the second game, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, where you land on the planet called Nashada, where you end up interacting with a beggar. You can either he asks for money. You can either be positive and give him money, or you can be negative and not give him money, scare him away. And from my time playing through both interactions, if you give him money, he runs away and that gets killed for his money. Where if you scare him away, he will be scared away and he'll be depressed. Overall, it has the way different nations interact with each other will change differently. It will change the nations. For example, one could say, due to the actions, for example, the Great Depression, it was made longer because of actions by the U.S. Anyway, let's continue.
Hey,
Do you
you
know any
should
about
also
the
like
thoughts of?
call people from the audience.
Sorry, what?
I was saying that you should also call people from the audience.
Yeah, I do. Does anyone want to? I think the raising hands is enabled. I think
No, no, just call them up. Otherwise, I don't think they'll be comfortable.
that is true. The Alpha Show. Would you like to add your opinion on it? Do you think that different nations have different impacts? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. Definitions. First, let's say homosexuality. It's a touchy topic, but depending on the definition, it can change a person's point of view. Say, if there are two people, one in Africa and one in America, the African, he would obviously have a narrower cone of vision as compared to the American. But the definition can, you know, make both the points comparatively stabler as compared to before. Yeah,
I'm kind of getting to what you're kind of saying. That brings me up into our second thought. Today, most of our discussion will be about the 5 thoughts of IR, or if it's officially called the paradigmism debate. Does anyone know about the paradigm debate before I explain it? I admit at the end I am biased towards a specific one, but I'll go over that once I go to each individual one. So in art, there are 5 thoughts. There is you don't have to memorize it, but it's called idealists, realists, Marxists, constructivism, and feminism. Those are the 5 thoughts. Something that all of us have innate bias, although on a spectrum wise, towards a specific area. So I will admit, all right, that I am biased towards the idealist, which is the idealist thinks of that it stresses the cooperative side of the international relations, where it is positive and an optimistic view of human nature and human progress. Um, Comparing that to the other ones, for example, realist is stress where it stresses the conflictual side of international relations, and which is usually negative and pessimistic of human nature and human progress. Where Marxist, where they believe it is a thing of individuals um, for freedom. Where constructivism believes the power of ideas, which is where what is more on the idea of the individual compared to a organized structure. Where at the end, the final one, feminism, is where they see gender bases. Everything's about gender. Pixel Hunter, where do you lie on this? Where do you think, from understanding it?
I'm currently, I'm country centrist. I recently got off a realist phase, and I'm just choosing what's next.
Yeah,
Probably on
realist.
Marxism. You know, of course, I have a bias towards freedom, not authoritarian governments. So, have you got any recommendations for me?
I'm sorry, but can you please repeat what you said?
I was saying that, do you have any recommendations for me? Since I recently got out of a realist phase.
I do not have any, fortunately. Anyway, now that we understand the individual 5 thoughts of international relations, the paradigm debate, there's a lot we can learn from this paradigm debate, for example, on how they impacted the nations. So first thing I think of when I think of it is the in the United States, I would think of where, before prior to World War One, for example, Wilson, he was known for his idealist, where he believed in the world peace, that we are able to get peace throughout the entire world. That is kind of idea for the League of Nations. I hope everyone knows what the League of Nations is, correct? Um, so yeah, in that, so yeah, you say something I can hear.
Continue, continue.
Where afterwards it is more realistic post Wilson. Afterwards, after the US did not join the League of Nations. One moment.
You repeat that.
All right, so now we'll be going into the individual of the different thoughts. One moment, I'm pulling it up. The idealist would usually think of that actually being better for more cooperative. So they would be more for trade, kind of. So usually a idealist would usually be against uh, tariffs, which are usually some things that are actually from the realist. So many would say that the negatives of, for example, the I of the idealist would, you could, for example, be the Great Depression or the crash of 2008 or many of the other different crashes because they happened due to the internationalists. As many have pointed out that as we have gotten more interconnected as a world, as there's been more trade, there has been more crashes.
A trend I've noticed that that time period between the crashes, economic crashes, is getting smaller every time crash happens. So like 1920 was a big crash, and then after 1970, then 2008, and I just think the time frame is getting smaller.
All right, yeah, that is true.
I don't think that is it. I don't think it's because the trade got bigger and all those stuff. I don't think that is the reason for those crashes. The crashes they didn't become more frequent. It's just that the crashes impacted more people. It's like a chain effect because the world trade is so interconnected. One crash here can cause this thing there, and it just chains on and on and on. Whereas like 1,000 years ago, the trades are like very small, very in like small circles. So the one crash wouldn't affect as many people. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Do you think, yeah, that the amount of crashes that happen is actually the same? You think? Is that what you're saying?
There may be an increase of frequency of crashes. There are a lot of factors in this, like technological improvements, stuff like that. But I don't think that it's just because the world has gone bigger. The world trade has gone bigger. I don't think that's the sole reason that led to crashes that affected more people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, complete sense.
Yeah.
Yes, in the end, I would say many things many of the crashes have happened because of. I'm thinking of the nation international scenario where many of the issues have stemmed from local issues becoming international. For example, it would be gun control, or as I was saying earlier, alcohol. That was a big thing of the previous. Those things, as I was saying about the gun debate not getting political, um, impact of one nation will have impact. Doing domestic issues will impact the other nations as well as the world becomes more global.
Yeah, so because the world's become more interconnected, of course, if one country is maybe having a crisis, it affects other countries. So it's like this interconnectedness, it brings so much more to every single country, but it does have a cost, like when someone's having a crisis. Yeah.
This brings me into another point of mine, where it is that we have, as a nation, as a world, we've tried to prevent. For example, we have the International World Bank, and we have the United Nations, which is not financial, but it is more interconnectedness. Is there any way we could have tried to stop these kind of local crashes becoming global crashes?
Good, but I no. See, we could stop them, but that would just mean closure of economies and slower progression of the world as a whole. And no, it's same like in inflation. We could also stop inflation, but that would just mean slowing down the economy, increasing taxes, and whatever. Also, since America is currently a superpower, so most economies are dependent on the New York Stock Exchange. So that's why I think that's just a factor. That's why they are connected alongside with trade and other things.
All right, so that was a. Oh, sorry, I cut out there. My bad.
While we're at it, what do you think what's going to happen with Evergrande in China? I mean, I've seen conflicted reports like China's government is going to bail them out, but on the other hand, they're telling their companies to prepare for a crash. Just doesn't make sense to me.
You asked me.
Both of you can answer, sure.
Can I repeat that? Can I repeat the question?
I might, I think I'll type it.
So yeah, I see you kind of thought of ideas. Reading through, I personally, through the different ideologies, one could say from the idealist point of view that there will not be a crash. But then others will, but if they say China will become a world power, where you could see the realist point of view, seeing it as there being possibly being of crash. However, that being part of building of the nation.
I mean, whether China becomes a global power, it just depends on whether the other countries, whether the EU, the US accept China as a trade partner, whether the US really tries to trade with them like normal business partners, but now they aren't, rightfully so. So I don't think China is going to be too much of a global power. If if the situation is like playing out right now, look at the situation between US and China deteriorating. because of that, I don't think China can rise to be like a global superpower compared to the US. It just depends on whether the EU, the US, the UK accept China as a fair trade partner.
I'm wondering from these five ideologies, which ideology you think would be most for having a good China or like a having a trade partner as China? Do you think?
Um.
Do you need to read them out again? Which ones they are?
Yeah. Yes, please. Yeah.
There is the idealist, which is for cooperation. That there's for optimistic view of human nature and progress, where realist is of seeing conflict. So that would be kind of like seeing changing of power, great powers. For example, from the UK to the US, or for example, from China to Rome, etc., etc. um, where, for example, a Marxist, which is everyone probably knows what Marxism is, where constructivism is stresses the power of ideas. So it's more of like individualism. Um, so this is one of the new ideologies where there is also feminism, which believes that the gender having impact on international relations.
Um. To be honest, I don't think any particular ideology can be placed with trading with China. Just yeah, Sarah.
All right, so yeah, in the end, it is true that no matter what, however the theory, there is a no matter what, there is a spectrum of how we apply
Yeah,
the.
because how China works and like how the US works is completely different. It's really hard to trade
think you're
between a capitalist
wrong
with a capitalist
because
market
constructivism
with
is basically based
authoritarian
on
regime.
how
It's hard to
I
trade.
think it's more of a wait and watch policy. Whatever happens, happens. And
Yeah,
as far as China
basically.
is concerned, I think they already are a great power. So there's no
Be-
much debate here. And plus, nobody can really do anything because trade wars, I mean, China's controlling literally 93% of the world's rare minerals, which is very important for US manufacturing industry. So it's a hard I think US is gonna have a hard time getting rid of China. Same with the European Union.
yeah, if they were really trying to get rid of China, they really have to do a lot of work, which they are right now, like investing in India and such. But it's gonna take a very long time to be dependent without to be independent without China. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure ideologies play a role. If China was Marxist, which it is in some form, it definitely would like lower its global trade because they can't import. Say they're only going to be exporting raw materials like food, textiles, and other things, and importing finished goods. They would say if they had an ideology like Germany, for example, then they would be exporting high quality medicine, finished goods. Yeah,
I'm just wondering, Hamlet, since you're going your masters, how would you define the five parts of the paradigm debate? I've defined mine, but what do you believe? Or what did you believe? How many parts of the paradigm debate do you believe there are? You know what I'm talking about? Like the realism, idealism. All right, so no. Okay.
Are you asking me? I'm sorry. You're breaking up.
No, I'm just saying that
Okay.
since I do know we have, if anyone else has experience knowing the actual official definitions of. Anyway,
I'm pretty sure nobody here knows the exact definitions, but we all have a general idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And bringing up the idea of China, I was reading, on my recent reading, I came across a quote from a expert where they said the rise of China will undoubtedly be one of the greatest dramas of the 21st century. China's extraordinary economic growth and active diplomacy are already transforming East Asia, and future decades will see even greater increases in Chinese power and influence. But exactly how this drama will play out is an open question. Will China overthrow the existing order or become part of it? And and what, if anything, can the United States do to maintain its position as China rises?
It really depends on what the US's policy is to China. If the US wants to keep trading with China, if the US thinks that the Uyghurs are being tortured, if they think that's okay and they keep trading with China, China is eventually going to be this superpower, and it essentially is going to dominate the world if no one does anything with them now. So I think it really depends on what the US, the other countries are treating China right now. So yeah, it's a difficult situation because the US is now like playing both sides. They want to trade with China, but they're still trying to have a hard stance on it. It's a difficult situation.
So yeah, that does. It is known that China has two types of diplomacy. Currently, they have the soft diplomacy and they have their hard diplomacy, where the hard one where they will use their military might. For example, building islands in the South China Sea, compared to soft, which is the road and the Silk Belt, Silk Road Initiative. As much as we can debate the individual parts of this, this falls into the the fog of present. So we will not know about this international relations results until far into the future. In the end, we did not know from transition from the UK to the US and the USSR until kind of recently, and overall the course of time.
Yeah, it really depends on whether these third world countries fall in China's trap, whether they are hungry for this short term money and get fallen into China's trap. We've seen this millions of times, like in Malaysia and Philippines. It really depends on whether these like African countries realize the dangers of China. It really depends on that.
About African countries, eh, I read about 3 to 4 months ago that their where they host their talks, political talks, election houses. Yes, they found it to be bugged with Chinese equipment, and the confidential data, the political data, was being sent to Chinese servers. So that's going to muddy their reputation a bit.
Think from that, you can see that the debate would be biased toward against China, but you can also see it of the idea that that overall it could be good. Um, so one can look at see that overall some of the things Chinese has done is actually helping. Not only themselves but the outside nations. Let me rephrase this. Um, However, actually, they are trying instead of beginning the new order, they're part of it. So one compared the rise of China right now to the previous rises. For example, you can compare it to the rise of Germany, where previously all their goods were known as cheap. Where now lots of China things are known as cheap and break easily. That's how Germany used to be known. And so some could say from seeing that that's how China will be going. Seeing the past, along the history has been that this has happened before.
Yeah, yeah, completely. That's yeah. If U.S. and other first world countries keep trading with them, then that's definitely the path China gonna take.
Yes, but I think the difference between Germany and China is that China is doing stuff in such a large scale. They're trying to engage with the African countries, they're trying to engage with Eastern European countries, they're trying to deal with the South China Sea, Xinjiang, Belt and Road. They have so many stuff going on. And Germany, we don't see that big expansion, not nearly as big as China's, and they are ramping up very, very quickly. So that is like one of the big differences between Germany and China. And before I go on, I just want to say that I'm definitely biased against China. Just point that out.
The entire reason China got where they are is because of their massive, massive small massive manufacturing capabilities. They make the mid-level stuff because mostly due to China, the first world countries are what they are as of now. The relations. Have you heard about AUKUS?
Can you please repeat that again, please?
AUKUS. AUKUS.
I don't believe I heard of that before.
Oh, AUKUS,
Yes,
the
yes,
Australia, US, UK deal, the
yes.
submarines, and all those France stuff. Yeah, I think it's a good step to counter China, definitely. And yeah, but the Australia is gonna have to depend on the US a lot more. But I do feel like this will head in a good way in countering against China. And yeah, along with like the Quad, the India, Japan, Australia, the US, all those um, all those kind of connections is gonna put up a good fight against China and South China Sea. But it really depends on whether they are willing to go on the aggressive route to counter it. Because if they don't be aggressive against China, China is just going to take advantage of them step by step. We see this already from the Scarborough show, if you're not aware. Um, so China, in like 2012, China tried to take Scarborough show, which is like the small island in the South China Sea. Obama administration told them to back off, and then they made a deal, and then they agreed to back off. Obama backed off, but China didn't. China stayed in Scarborough Shoal until today because Obama didn't take a tough stance against China. Because Obama thought China would agree to their fair trade, to their fair deal and just back off, but they didn't. So it's really important for everywhere else to put on an aggressive stance against China, because if not, China is just going to take advantage of them step by step.
Anyway, switching the debate now, let's discuss constructivism. Um, Overall, many have thought that individuals and groups, for example, corporations, Google, can have a large impact on the international community. Would the idea of international relations include the corporations, individuals, or do you believe that's something that would not be considered part of international relations? I would be biased. I believe that that has an impact. I do believe the impact of SpaceX, many of the organizations, does have an impact on international relations. On, for example, China, the United States, and many of the actual other nations. I mean, seeing the building up of SpaceX on other nations' soil, I do believe has a large impact.
Definitely,
I
those
mean, in the end, they
countries,
actually, yeah, continue.
if they are a part of the country, a part of the country's development is dependent on these companies. So of course it's going to have an impact. It's, of course, yeah.
All right, and next thing was the feminist theory, um, which can get very political. Does everyone believe that the feminist viewpoint has a sorry, let me rephrase this one. No, I'm just going to drop this one. All right, so now we're going to go into the debate
Hey, wait,
portion.
wait, wait, wait. What was the question?
I was
I just
mentioning
got.
the final one. Then now we're going into the debate section of the discussion. Um, how do you guys define sovereignty?
Let me
For me,
think how I should rephrase first. So you go on.
When I think sovereign, I think independent. Those are the only two things that come in mind.
so are you talking like so if something has independence, it would be sovereign, but if it were controlling something else, it would not be. Is that kind of saying? Like for example, Northern Cyprus compared to a free organization, for example, Google.
It it depends on the conditions. Say, like American. If I take a piece of American land, I would say this is sovereign American land. But if I take Hong Kong, I would not say it's sovereign because you know what happened there. I don't really have an exact definition on it currently. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, sovereignty is basically like you have control on what's happening in your land. For example, like he said, Hong Kong does not have sovereignty because China is basically controlling everything there. But whereas if you look at places like Taiwan, even though China said that Taiwan is part of China, Taiwan has sovereignty. They can do the things that they want to do. They can make deals with the US, so that they have sovereignty. So sovereignty is basically like the country has its power to control itself without other without third parties interfering with them. That's what I consider sovereignty.
All right. So the second question: um, how do you guys do you think how would the domestic politics be different from the international on the current time? Like you could say in the past, domestic is far different from international, but now today,
Could you repeat that?
how do you guys think international politics has a different from domestic politics, or do you think they're related, or do you think that's something that's separate? Like, how do you think it will like if there's a line from hot to cold, how do you think it will be on there?
I don't know what you guys, but I think they're related. Like, because international politics indirectly depends on domestic politics decisions. So, say if California were to pass a tax law, then other states are also likely to pass a tax law which will affect U.S. economy. And yeah,
Yeah, agree. There's like a chain effect, which just slowly climbs into affecting international politics. Yeah.
All right. So the third question I have is there's the idea of the glass half full, half empty. Um, Comparing that to the international scale, um, do you think the nation as a whole is more of, or the world is going positive or negative, half full or half empty? What do you guys think? I personally think that it is the um, half full that there is increasing. That's kind of coming from my bias in idealism.
In one aspect, you mean in social aspect, trading aspect, economical aspect, environmental aspect. Which aspect of the world are you talking about?
I'm talking
I
I'm
would say
talking
like
in like economics. I'm talking in
yeah.
trading. I'm talking all that stuff.
Okay.
With your
I'm
thought of
pretty sure
relations.
like compared to the medieval century, all aspects of life have improved. So yeah, half full.
Um, I don't know a lot about economic stuff like that, to be frank, but I do feel like it is heading off in a bad direction, sort of, because when I think of economics, I think of all these big corporations having so much control around the world, like Google, stuff like that. So I do feel like because companies are controlling the world economy that much, it makes it sort of a monopoly, like a multi-monopoly, whatever that is. So I do think it's half empty because these companies are controlling the market a lot.
Yeah, okay. In economics, you could say that, but I don't know. You're pretty rich as compared to, let's say, you take a 18th century person and you take a 20th century person. There's going to be massive differences in between both of them. I'm just saying that the quality of life has gone drastically up. Medicine has, you know, increased life expectancy, and still think it's half full would be better. Informant.
Yes, yes. I kind of see that betterment. All right, the next question. Do you guys think that do you think there's more independence? For me, for example, when I think of independence, I think of airports. That's the thing I think of. I think of ships. I think of there being more communication. For example, that it's a lot cheaper, for example, to communicate between the United States or and UK, or for example, from Russia to South America. It is far cheaper, making that trade a lot more possible. Like the question says here, what would guys consider 5 examples to be interdependence of the global? Or do you think that's actually decreasing? You know what I'm saying?
Interdependence of
Global interdependence.
global interdependence is definitely increasing. Compared to before, like most countries have to farm for their own food, but now most countries do not really have to farm for their own. Some countries don't farm anything because do not have the land, yet they still exist due to the mineral wealth and population resources present in their country.
Yeah, definitely agreed. And it's sort of like this cycle. At first, like hundreds of years ago, the trade from Europe to America to Africa, this has already created like a trade cycle sort of. And then after that, in order for nations to join in order for the nations to compete in an international level, they have to join into the cycle. And that just repeats and repeats and repeats. And now, any country that wants to rise to a global power has to join in that global trade cycle because without it, your economy is basically trash. So yes, definitely the interdependency of nations has definitely decreased.
Many would say yes in the end. That's a bad thing. Dependent, even if you are poor, that there's even then there is drawbacks to it. The more global scale, the more global interaction. I don't know if I asked you before, but do you guys think which ideology do you think of the 5, the realist, idealist, the Marxist, constructivist, or feminist paradigms do you think would be most related to understanding that, but also understanding different relationships that on to the improving international scale?
I don't really have an opinion on any of those right now, but If I had to pick one, I would take idealism because we are pretty rich. The richest period in the history of entire human civilization was the Gilded Age, and I'm pretty sure we are past the Gilded Age level. So yeah, we're the richest we've ever been in human civilization. Idealist would be the way for me.
What do you think, Shui? Which one do you lines with you?
Um, yeah, basically, I agree with him. Like, I can't really think of one single ideology that can just be placed like a puzzle piece to unlock this trade. I think, but I do feel like if I were to pick one, it would be ideologism. I don't know, ideologism. I don't know how to read it. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, it would be that.
All right.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question?
Yes, feel free.
Of course,
Um, yeah. How do you think climate change has to be tackled? Because climate change, you got so many countries with different interests. Like for example, the U.S., NATO against Russia, China. They can't agree on the same thing. They can't if they can't agree on the same thing about climate change. So how do you think is the best solution to tackle it? If you've got so many countries with different interests, for example, China, they just want to focus on making their coal. How do you think climate change should be tackled when there are so many different countries with their own interests, and some of them just don't care about climate change? How do you think that should be tackled?
When I see this, I think of, as well as you mentioned, I said many times over this time, I would see this in the 5 points of the paradigm debate, where I would see it as, although in the end they will have different ones, there is a way that it will always end up um, in the towards the right direction, I believe. Anyway, of the two people in the audience, would you guys willing to say your two thoughts of your um, how would you lie on the 5 paradigm debate in chat? Would it be possible? Since I know you guys are in the chat. Anyway, that is all I have. So now this is the debate section. All right. Since I believe that we won't have anything more to add, we'll be planning for doing another discussion next Sunday. This time around, all right. So this week, I based it around the section 1, part 1 of the book, Fundamental Principles of International Relations by J. I don't know his first name, but J. Martin Rochester. I've pinned it in the discussions chat. For the next week, the thing I'll be discussing most in depth will be kind of the history of international relations, how we got from the Peace of Westphalia, which was a treaty in 1648, I believe, which is beginning of international relations to come to the future. So we'll be reading. If you want to read what I'll be discussing, and yeah, it is part 1, section 2.
Hey, informant. Are you in vacation?
I'm sorry. Can you please repeat?
Are you on vacation?
No, I am not.
Lincoln told me you are. Okay then. But still, you have spent a lot of time in this, and thank you for that. But I just want to tell you, you don't need to. But if you want to do it, of course, thank you.
All right,
Just
cool.
yeah.
Anyway, that's good. Yeah, next Sunday it will be the same time. It will be 1 p.m. UTC time. In this stage channel. Thank you guys for coming. If you guys any, I'll be leaving the stage open for a
Thanks for
couple minutes
having
and
me.
I'll be shutting it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.
And the recording will be online if you guys want the recording.
So yeah.